Have you ever actually stopped and wondered if your perception of reality is, well, real? Or is it just a temporary, completely alterable state of mind? I know, it's a pretty heavy question to start with, right? But what if I told you that over 2 millennia ago, this exact question was being fiercely debated in an ancient pavilion? Let's dive in.
Welcome to today's Explainer. We are going to explore the very architecture of the mind by looking at an absolutely fascinating ancient text called the Potthapada Sutta. And what's so cool about this document is that it doesn't just ask lofty philosophical questions. It actually acts as a highly detailed, step-by-step manual on the mechanics of human perception. It explains how perception forms and, incredibly, how it can be systematically turned off.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the shift from chaos to calm. Look at precepts to protect the mind, abandoning the 5 hindrances, mapping the gradual cessation of perception, uncovering the truth about self, and finally, diving into questions to leave unanswered.
All right, Section 1, Chaos to Calm.
To really appreciate this text, we have to set the scene. Imagine this massive, ancient debating hall, known as the Malakarama, surrounded by these beautiful ebony trees. You've got the philosopher Potthapada sitting there with a massive crowd of 3,000 followers. And they are loud. They're deeply engaged in what the text calls tiracana kata, basically chaotic worldly gossip. They're arguing over kings, thieves, armies, food, village drama, the whole shebang. It is quite literally the ancient equivalent of doom scrolling through a super noisy feed. And then, in complete contrast, enters the Buddha. He approaches the hall in profound, intentional silence. In fact, Potthapada actually has to hush his 3,000 followers just to get the Buddha to come inside, reminding them that the Buddha praises quietness. This physical shift from deafening noise to absolute silence perfectly sets the stage for the psychological journey we're about to go on.
Once things finally quiet down, Potthapada presents the Buddha with the ultimate question that all the ascetics of his day are obsessing over. Abhissanani Rhoda, which is the total cessation of perception. How does human consciousness actually turn off? Potthapada lays out the reigning theories of the time. Some guys argue it happens entirely by chance. Perception just randomly switches on and off. Others claim it's a soul entering and leaving the body. And a third camp believes that powerful gods or spirits are magically granting and revoking consciousness.
Moving right along to Section 2, Precepts to Protect the Mind.
The Buddha steps in and immediately rejects all of that. He says, no, it's not chance, it's not wandering souls, and it's definitely not divine intervention. Instead, he explains that perception actually has causes and conditions. It can be systematically trained, and that training starts from the outside in, using foundational tools known as sila, or moral discipline. Now, I know it's incredibly easy to look at ancient lists of moral precepts, things like abstaining from harm, theft, false speech, or even frivolous entertainment, as just rigid, arbitrary rules. But the text frames them completely differently. They aren't punishments at all. They are a defense mechanism. By actively guarding the sensory doors, your eyes, your ears, and acting with total mindfulness, you're creating a protective barrier. You aren't just trying to be a good person for the sake of some cosmic scorecard. You are actively protecting your mind from external turbulence so that real, deep internal focus even becomes possible.
Which brings us to Section 3, Abandoning the 5 hindrances. So once that external shield is up, the real internal work begins. And what I absolutely love about this part of the text is how brilliantly it translates abstract mental hindrances into deeply relatable, emotional experiences. It doesn't just tell you to stop being distracted. Instead, it compares carrying mental burdens to being trapped in crippling debt, suffering from a severe disease, being locked in a dark prison, living as a slave dependent on others, or walking completely alone down a dangerous desert road. We can all feel the anxiety in those scenarios, right? But then look at the feeling of freedom. When you finally clear your mind of these hindrances, the text compares the resulting joy to the immense relief of paying off that debt, regaining your health, stepping out of a dark prison into the sunlight, gaining your independence, or finally arriving safely at a secure village. It's an incredible psychological release. Joy naturally arises, the body completely calms down, and the mind becomes intensely concentrated.
Okay, Section 4, Gradual Cessation of Perception.
That intense concentration leads the practitioner into profound, deeply quiet states of meditation known as the jhanas. And watch how beautifully this sequence builds. This isn't like suddenly pulling the plug on a TV, it's a very systematic, intentional deactivation. In the very first step, the meditator experiences joy and active thought born from being secluded. But fairly quickly, they realize that active thinking is actually a bit too coarse, too noisy. So they simply drop it. They move to the second stage, where thoughts vanish entirely, leaving only pure focus and joy. Then, even that intense joy starts to feel too agitating, so it fades into this profound, quiet contentment in the third stage. By the fourth stage, you're left with pure mindfulness and absolute neutrality. But it actually doesn't stop there. The meditator then moves past physical form entirely. They begin perceiving only infinite space, then shift to perceiving infinite consciousness, and finally, they reach a state of perceiving absolute nothingness. At every single step, a coarser perception is intentionally dropped for a subtler one.
And then we hit this truly mind-bending realization. Standing right at the very edge of perception, in that realm of nothingness, the meditator has a crucial realization. When I think, it is worse for me. When I do not think, it is better. They realize that even the mere intention to perceive, just the sheer effort of directing the mind, is a burden. By simply letting go of that final delicate intention, the remaining subtle perceptions fade away and no new ones arise. Boom! This is the cessation of perception. It doesn't happen by random chance. It's an absolute masterclass in the art of letting go.
All right, Section 5, the truth about self.
So naturally, this brings up a huge question. If perception can be systematically dismantled and turned off, what happens to the self that is experiencing it? Like, am I my perception? To answer this, the Buddha outlines 3 types of identity, or self, that people tend to cling to. First, you have the gross self. That's your physical body made of basic elements and sustained by food. Second, there's a mind-made self. Think of it as a subtle mental body. And third, the formless self, which is pure consciousness and perception itself. Potthapada really wants to know which one of these is the true eternal soul, but the Buddha systematically deconstructs all 3 of them. He explains that his entire teaching is designed to abandon all these states, because frankly, not a single one of them represents a permanent, fixed soul.
There's this brilliant analogy that Buddha gives to another follower named Sita later in the text to really drive this home. Think about the life cycle of milk. You start with fresh milk. Over time, it turns into curds. Then you churn those curds into butter. Finally, you clarify that butter into ghee. Now when you have a bowl of ghee in front of you, you don't look at it and say, hey, please pass the fresh milk, right? It's in a completely different state. The Buddha explains that our identities, whether they are physical, mental, or formless, are exactly like this. They are constantly shifting based on conditions. The words I, me, or self are really just convenient labels. They're just conventional language we use to navigate the world without bumping into things. They aren't a fixed, unchanging reality.
And finally, Section 6, questions to leave unanswered.
Now, we humans absolutely love to speculate, don't we? Potthapada is still super hungry for a juicy philosophical debate, so he starts rapid-firing questions at the Buddha. These are known as the avyakata, the unanswered questions. Is the world eternal or not? Is the universe infinite? Are the soul and the physical body the exact same thing, or are they totally different? Do we exist after death, not exist, or both? And the Buddha's response to every single one of these is a firm, flat-out, I do not declare this. He completely refuses to engage. The text actually offers a fantastic metaphor for this. Arguing about these grand concepts is like meticulously building a ladder at a crossroads to climb into a magnificent mansion, but having absolutely zero idea what the mansion looks like or even what direction it's in. It's a complete waste of energy. The Buddha's approach is fiercely, unrelentingly pragmatic. His only question is, does this alleviate suffering right now?
He spells it out, literally right here. He says, because it is not connected with the goal, it does not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace. Therefore, I do not declare it. The Buddha has absolutely zero interest in entertaining endless philosophical debates that don't practically help deconstruct the ego or actually bring an end to mental anguish.
So what does he actually endorse? What's the pragmatic alternative? It's the 4 noble truths: the truth of suffering, the origin of that suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the actionable, step-by-step path to actually achieve that cessation. Unlike building a ladder for a magic castle you've never seen, these truths are completely observable right here, right now, within your very own mind and body.
This explainer on the Potthapada Sutta reveals just what a staggering piece of ancient psychology this text really is. It takes us from a noisy, chaotic courtyard all the way down into the total, profound silencing of the mind, systematically proving that what we consider our reality is incredibly fluid, which leaves us with a pretty wild takeaway. As we wrap things up today, I want to leave you with this final thought. If perception can quite literally be turned off, and our identity constantly changes over time like milk turning into ghee, who is the you experiencing this very moment?
Think about that the next time you hear your own internal monologue. Thank you so much for joining me today, and as always, keep questioning what you perceive.